The file rewrote itself while I was looking at it, and my name was the only thing that stayed the same. I blinked once, then again. On the transparent screen of my desk, lines of corporate text shifted like something breathing under glass. Names rearranged. Positions vanished. An entire branch of the family tree collapsed into a neat gray footnote. The header remained: Inherited Risk Assessment, Confidential, and underprepared by, as always, Theo Vale. A thin sound crept into my ears. Not quite a ring, more like the memory of metal being struck somewhere very far away. I leaned back in my chair, the city stretching below me through 47 floors of glass. From up here, traffic looked like orderly veins. Controlled. Predictable. That illusion usually calmed me. Today, it didn't. The smell came next. Ozone. Sharp and cold, like the second before lightning splits the sky. Don't. I muttered to myself, already too late. The pressure built behind my eyes, familiar and unwelcome. My ability, my curse depending on who you asked, never announced itself politely. When a system locked into a future collapse, my body noticed before my brain could justify it. The screen flickered. A new name appeared where 3 others had been. Adrian Crow, Acting CEO. Crow Dynamics subsidiary. I had no memory of authorizing that change. My fingers hovered over the surface. The metallic taste bloomed on my tongue. Some people get migraines. Some people get anxiety. I get premonitions dressed up as compliance reports. My comm lit up before I could pull the file offline. Exec board request. Immediate on-to-site audit. Crow Dynamics. Of course. I stood, smoothing my jacket more out of habit than necessity. In the mirror-paneled wall across my office, my reflection watched me with practiced calm, dark suit.
If this story caught you, subscribe. More are waiting.
Precise posture. Beta-neutral pheromone blockers faint at my throat. Corporate safe. Predictable. No one looking at me ever guessed I could taste the future when it started to rot. Crow Dynamics occupied 12 pristine floors of silver and light, all glass corridors and biometric doors. The kind of place designed to suggest transparency while hiding everything that mattered behind permissions. As I followed the guidance line across the polished floor, the sensor lights bloomed ahead of my steps, like I was being granted passage through something alive. The conference room doors parted without sound. He was already there. Adrian Crow stood at the head of the table, hands resting lightly on the glass surface, as if he were grounding himself. Tall. Impeccably composed. Dark hair neatly combed back. A single rebellious lock suggesting effortfully cultivated imperfection. His suit fit him the way good lies fit truth. Too well. He turned when he sensed me. Not when he heard me. That, I noticed. Mr. Vale, he said, voice smooth, unhurried. Or should I say the man who predicts corporate death? A corner of his mouth curved. Not quite a smile. Risk, I corrected automatically. Failure patterns. Structural instabilities. His gaze didn't waver. Gray eyes. Sharp. Curious. Same thing, he replied. Just better vocabulary. We shook hands. His grip was warm. Steady. And my senses went blank. No pressure spike. No metallic taste. No ozone. Just an absence. Like standing in a room where all the furniture had been removed, but the imprints were still on the floor. For the first time in my career, I couldn't feel the future around someone. It should have terrified me. Instead, it intrigued me. We took our seats. Executives filtered in, murmuring, arranging tablets, projecting slides. The standard theater of confidence. Adrian listened more than he spoke, but when he did, the room subtly reoriented itself toward him. He didn't dominate. He aligned. Dangerous. I opened the file in front of me. The same one from my office. As I scrolled, the text remained obedient. Static. No shifts. No glitches. Only one thing stood out. Where there should have been probabilistic breakdowns, projected vulnerabilities, branching outcomes, there was nothing. No forecasts. No collapses. Just a gray placeholder. Future pathway? Data unavailable. I lifted my eyes. Adrian was already watching me. Not anxiously. Assessing. You're disappointed, he said softly. I don't like surprises, I replied. That earned me a real smile. People like you, he said, tilting his head just slightly, don't measure danger, you authorize it. The words settled between us, precise and deliberate. Something cold slid down my spine. For the first time since the file had rewritten itself, the smell of ozone returned. But this time, it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like recognition. Victor Vale's office was not on any corporate map. The elevator that took us there didn't have floor numbers. Just a black panel and a biometric scanner that pulsed once before recognizing my uncle's palm. "Family access still works," Victor said mildly, as if commenting on the weather. The doors opened onto a corridor that smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant. No glass. No branding. No ambient music. The sensor lights didn't bloom here. They snapped on, sharp and white, revealing matte walls and a security detail in plain suits with no insignia. The old wing. The part of the building everyone pretended had been renovated out of existence. We walked in silence. Each step echoed too clearly. "You're doing well, Theo," Victor said after a moment. "The board trusts you. Regulators listen to you. Even competitors build their risk models around your forecasts." "That wasn't why you called me," I replied. A corner of his mouth lifted. Approval, not amusement. "Of course not." He stopped in front of a door that looked like every other door. No plaque. No card slot. It opened to a room without windows. The air inside was cooler. Drier. The kind of environment designed to preserve things. Metal shelves lined the walls, stacked with beige folders instead of servers. A long table occupied the center, its surface scarred by decades of use. At the far end stood Mara Hensley, hands folded, posture immaculate, her expression composed into something almost kind. "Mr. Vale," she said. "Thank you for coming." Victor gestured me in. "This," he said, "is where the models end." He slid a folder toward me. No digital interface. No watermark. Just ink. The first case detailed a logistics heir, who had suffered an abrupt psychiatric break 2 years after pushing for voting reform. The second, a biotech successor whose company collapsed under a cascade of regulatory findings, later proven technically accurate and strategically timed. The third was shorter. A banking daughter. Sudden illness. Institutionalization. Assets redistributed. None of them were dead. Worse, they're still alive, I said slowly. Yes, Mara agreed gently. They just no longer exist in any way that matters. Victor took the folder from my hands and replaced it with another. Then another. Accidents, he said. Market failures, health complications, scandals. We don't remove bloodlines, Theo, we optimize them. The phrase landed with practiced ease. Succession optimization, Mara added. A predictive framework designed to minimize volatility within founder structures. Emotional inheritance is inefficient. My stomach tightened. What you call volatility, I said, other people call family. Victor watched me the way he always had when I was younger. When I had tried to argue philosophy at a dinner table built for contracts. Family, he said calmly, is an economic system before it is a feeling. He gestured to the shelves. These people weren't destroyed. They were rewritten. Legally, socially, medically, their narratives were adjusted to reflect more sustainable outcomes. And my role? I asked, already knowing. Mara met my eyes. You make those outcomes lawful before they're necessary, she said. Your reports don't react to collapse. They authorize its shape. The words echoed Adrian's. A faint, humiliating heat crept up my neck. Victor slid one last folder across the table. This is why you're here, he said. We're restructuring a lineage. Quietly. Preemptively. The name on the tab was printed in neutral gray. Crow E. Adrian. CEO. Subsidiary head. Inherited risk. Unclassified. You want me, I said carefully, to build a legal and financial pathway that allows for his removal. Not removal, Victor corrected. Resolution. My hands curled against my will. He hasn't done anything, I said. Victor's gaze sharpened. Just slightly, not yet, he replied. But blood always does. Mara stepped closer, lowering her voice. He is an anomaly, she said. And anomalies destabilize systems. The room felt smaller, cooler. I thought of the blank space where Adrian's future should have been. Of the absence. What happens, I asked, if I refuse? Victor studied me. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. You won't, he said. You never have. The words shouldn't have hurt. They did. As we left the room, the light snapping off behind us, a familiar taste crept back onto my tongue. Metal. And something else. Shame. If Victor's world was built of locked rooms and paper ghosts, Adrian's was all glass. The main negotiation hall of Crow Dynamics curved outward like the bow of a ship, offering a panoramic view of the city. Noon light spilled over the table, fractured by architectural fins that made every reflection look intentional. Controlled. Adrian stood at the screen, jacket off, sleeves rolled to reveal the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to perform power. Your preliminary model assumes stagnation, he said, eyes flicking briefly to me. But stagnation is a choice, not an outcome. I tapped the projection, pulling up the cascade of dependencies. Stagnation is what happens, I replied, when growth is engineered to protect legacy assets instead of future ones. Legacy assets like people? He asked. Legacy assets like risk, I corrected. A faint smile. The executives shifted, uncertain whether this was debate or theater. Adrian tilted his head, studying the graph. Then show me where my company dies. The room went still. I didn't answer immediately. My data should have bloomed with red. It didn't. There is no projected failure, I said finally. He turned fully toward me. That's not an answer, he said. That's an anomaly. Our eyes held. Around him, the future was quiet. No pressure, no fracture lines. Just a hollow absence, like the silence after something vital has been removed. After the meeting, he said, not a request. The server floor hummed like a restrained storm. Blue lights traced endless rows of hardware. The air was cool, dry, carefully filtered. Adrian walked beside me, hands in his pockets, matching my pace without effort. You work like someone trained to expect sabotage, he observed. You run a subsidiary like someone trained to be it, I shot back. That earned a short laugh. Genuine. Fair, he said. Tell me something, Theo Vale. Did they send you to stabilize me, or to study me? Both, I said. Honest, he noted. That's inefficient. We stopped in front of a terminal cluster. I logged in, pulling activity streams, access histories, internal anomalies. Adrian leaned closer, reading over my shoulder. The smell hit me again. Ozone. Clean. Sharp. My pulse ticked faster. Do you ever get the sense, he asked quietly, that the systems around you know more about you than the people inside them? Yes, I said. That's literally my job. A corner of his mouth lifted, but his eyes stayed watchful. They tried to erase a branch of this company last year, he said, casual in tone, surgical in content. Quietly. A logistics error, perfect implosion. Everyone applauded the efficiency. I froze. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because the same consultancy drafted the first risk memo on my appointment, he replied. And because you didn't deny it when I said your reports authorize futures. He turned his head slightly, enough to meet my gaze. I don't think you're here to protect this company, he said. I think you're here to decide who doesn't survive it. The words threaded directly into the memory of Victor's room. Of beige folders. Of rewritten lives. My temples throbbed. Then why talk to me at all? I asked. Adrian considered that. Because, he said, you look like someone who still checks if the knife is yours before you use it. It was past 9 when we reconvened in his office. The city had dimmed into a constellation of windows and traffic veins. The glass walls reflected us back at ourselves, two figures standing too close to the same edge. We had stripped the problem down to bare architecture, asset flows, influence lines, governance loopholes. He challenged my assumptions. I dissected his projections. We moved pieces, broke them, rebuilt them. Time softened. At some point, he handed me coffee without asking. You work like someone who expects the system to lie, he said. Because it does? To you, too? I hesitated. Yes. He studied me with a new expression then. Not assessment, recognition. My entire career, he said slowly, has been built on transparency that never quite reached me. I closed my tablet. Your reports decide who gets to have a future, he said, voice low, precise. So, tell me. Do I? The question didn't feel hypothetical. My ability stirred, restless. The air seemed thinner around him, like the world was holding its breath. I don't know, I admitted. He didn't look away. Then, he said, you're the first honest person in this building. Outside, a storm flashed over the horizon. Inside, something fragile and dangerous settled into place between us. Not trust, but the beginning of it. The archives were supposed to be dead space. Cold. Predictable. A mausoleum of closed cases and sealed histories. I'd always liked them for that. Elliot didn't. You know, he muttered, tugging a box from a rolling shelf. Normal people meet friends for drinks when they're spiraling. They don't dig through pre-digital burial grounds. Normal people don't get summoned to rooms without windows, I said, slipping on gloves. Pull the H series. He shot me a look over his glasses. That's not ominous at all. The archive lights hummed overhead, flattening everything into institutional gray. Elliot was all angles and nervous energy, his jacket perpetually half-buttoned, his mouth unable to resist commentary even when his fingers flew efficiently over catalog terminals. What are we hunting? He asked. Patterns, I said. On Adrian Crowe. He paused. The CEO you're auditing? Yes. The CEO your uncle personally authorized you to audit? Yes. Elliot winced. Oh, that kind of spiral. We worked in silence for a while, pulling corporate lineage trees, succession drafts, shell restructurings. On my screen, documents loaded, glitched, corrected themselves. Then glitched again. A voting rights amendment dated 3 years in the future appeared in a file closed 7 years ago. An asset redistribution schedule referenced an executive board that technically didn't exist yet. The more closely a document touched Adrian Crowe, the less stable it became. My head began to throb. That's not normal metadata decay, Elliot murmured, leaning closer. That's like the system can't decide what he is, neither could I. When a risk forecast generated itself without my input, projecting reputational collapse tied to Adrian's division, I did something I had never done before. I deleted it. The pressure behind my eyes spiked instantly. My stomach rolled, heat flushing through my limbs like I'd stepped into fever. The system didn't correct the absence. It recorded it. I pulled my hands back as if from something hot. Tell me you didn't just do that, Elliot said quietly. I just did that. He exhaled through his teeth. Theo. That's not analysis. That's interference. The words stayed with me long after I left him in the stacks. The metro was crowded. Loud. Safe in the way only anonymity could be. I stood between strangers, my shoulder brushing a woman's coat, my pulse still off rhythm. The metallic taste lingered. Every vibration of the train reverberated behind my eyes. You're already participating. The thought wasn't an accusation. It was a diagnosis. My comm buzzed. Mara Hensley. Internal. I answered before I could reconsider. You accessed restricted lineage partitions, she said. Voice smooth as glass. That's irregular. So is engineering disappearances, I replied. A pause. Not surprise. Calculation. You're tired, she said gently. You've been exposed to volatile data. It happens. You blur professional distance. Your models around Crowe don't stabilize, I said. They fracture. That's because he is not a future, she answered. He is a correction. The words slid under my skin. You're too close, she continued. Your work requires detachment. No, I said, pulse pounding. It requires honesty. Her tone cooled by half a degree. Careful, Theo, she said. Your reputation is built on precision. Don't make it emotional. The line went dead. The train shuddered to a stop. Doors opened. Air rushed in. I didn't move. My apartment lights activated automatically, washing the walls in soft white. The space was minimal. Ordered. Designed to quiet things. It didn't. As soon as the door sealed, the pressure exploded. I dropped my bag, braced my hands on the counter as nausea surged. My vision tunneled, the world narrowing to breath and pulse and the echo of Mara's voice. Correction. I tasted metal. The smell of ozone thickened, sharp and clean and wrong. I wasn't predicting collapse. I was resisting it. And for the first time in my life, my ability wasn't guiding me toward the system's outcome. It was pulling me away from it. I sank onto the floor, back against the cabinet, breath uneven. Risk had always been abstract. Until it had a face, and I had chosen it. The oldest legal archive in the Vale Group wasn't underground. It was worse. It was on the top floor of a decommissioned annex, where sunlight had yellowed the shelves and the air smelled faintly of dust and varnish. The kind of place companies sent things they didn't want to destroy, but couldn't afford to remember. I signed out a stack of bound ledgers, under an obsolete registry number, and carried them to a long oak table scarred with decades of negotiations. Founders didn't leave ghosts. They left paperwork. Most of it was dull. Asset transfers. Trust constructions. Marriage settlements dressed up as mergers. Then I found the birth trust. No announcement. No press trail. No celebratory addendum. Just a silent allocation of private shares into a shell foundation established 31 years ago. The beneficiary field was sealed behind a later amendment. I traced it forward. The foundation paid for one child. Education. Medical care. Residences. Every major milestone quietly underwritten by corporate instruments that never touched the family tree. The amendment unsealed under my credentials. Beneficiary, Adrian Crow. My breath caught. The foundation's original charter bore only one signature. The founders. Adrian hadn't been inserted into the dynasty. He'd been financed around it. A child supported, not claimed. Contained, not named. His entire career, every subsidiary appointment, every carefully limited promotion, wasn't trust. It was quarantine. I closed the ledger slowly. The room felt too large. The bar across the street was empty in the way places got when they were waiting to be forgotten. I sat alone, a glass of something clear in front of me, not drinking. The truth pressed against my ribs, heavy and sharp. I wasn't uncovering history. I was excavating intent. They hadn't been watching Adrian to evaluate him. They had been managing him to exhaust him. To keep him visible but never central. Important, but never inheritable. My comm vibrated on the table. Adrian Crow E., still working. If you are. I stared at the words, then I stood. His office was dark except for the city spilling through the glass walls. He was at his desk, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled, the loosened tie doing nothing to soften the rigid line of his shoulders. You look like someone who found a body, he said when he saw me. In a way, I replied. He gestured to the bar console. Drink? No. That made him look at me properly. I walked to the center of the room and set my tablet on the table between us. I accessed legacy instruments, I said. The ones predating the public structure. He didn't interrupt. There is a private foundation, I continued. It was established before the corporation went public. It funded exactly one child. Not a department, not a project. I met his eyes. You. The silence that followed had weight. You were never integrated into the dynasty, I said. You were maintained outside it. Your education, your placements, even this subsidiary. Every step was structured to give you proximity without authority. His jaw tightened. They didn't prepare you to inherit, I said. They prepared you to be managed. Something flickered across his expression. Not confusion. Recognition. The foundation's original signature, I added quietly, belongs to the founder. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then Adrian reached for the glass he'd poured earlier. His fingers closed around it. The sound was small. Almost polite. The glass fractured. Liquid spilled across his skin and onto the floor, catching the city light in thin, trembling lines. He didn't react to the cut. Didn't swear. Didn't breathe. His knuckles were white. I always wondered, he said eventually, voice level in a way that frightened me, why the word family was never used in any of my contracts. Blood welled between his fingers. I stepped forward without thinking, caught his wrist, guided him to the sink. He let me. The control he wore like armor had cracked. They couldn't erase you outright, I said. So they made you a permanent provisional. A breath shuddered out of him. Do you know what it's like, he asked softly, to build a life out of positions no one is willing to name? I didn't answer. There wasn't one. We stood there, the water running, the city watching, the truth finally given a place to exist. After a long moment, he looked at me. Not as a CEO, not as a target, as someone exposed. You could have kept this, he said. Yes. You didn't. No. Something unspoken passed between us then. Not safety. But the first fragile outline of it. The roof was colder than I expected. Wind moved freely up here, slipping between buildings, tugging at jackets, carrying the low hum of the city like distant surf. Adrian stood near the edge, forearms resting against the glass barrier, looking down at the grid of lights as if it were something he could finally observe instead of manage. I joined him without speaking. For a while, we let the silence do the work. Do you know, he said eventually, what my first corporate contract actually was? No. Non-disclosure, he replied. I was 13. My tutor told me it was normal, that it meant I was being taken seriously. He let out a quiet breath that almost laughed. I thought it meant I was chosen. The wind lifted his hair slightly, undoing the precision of it. They didn't raise me, he continued. They calibrated me. Every interest that was encouraged, every weakness that was redirected, even rebellion was permitted, as long as it stayed cosmetic. I watched the reflection of the city slide across the glass in front of us. They built a version of me that would never threaten the structure, he said. Only maintain it. Something tightened in my chest. I used to think, I said slowly, that neutrality was integrity, that if I stayed focused on models instead of people, I couldn't be accused of cruelty. He glanced at me. I called it professionalism, I went on. I called it detachment. But what it really was permission. I gave the system language. I made outcomes look inevitable. I flexed my fingers, remembering the weight of the folders, the sound of breaking glass. I told myself I wasn't responsible, I said. Only precise. And now? He asked. Now I know precision is just a way to hide intention. The words felt like a confession. We stood there, the city vast below us, neither of us quite fitting into the roles it had prepared. When the wind grew sharper, Adrian gestured toward the stairwell. My driver's gone, he said. I sent him off an hour ago. So did mine. We looked at each other. Then he smiled, small and tired. Good, he said. I don't want witnesses tonight. His car was parked in the executive garage, black and discreet, the kind of vehicle designed to disappear in its own importance. The city slipped past the windows in liquid streaks of light as he drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely near the console. I don't want to be managed out of existence, he said suddenly. I won't let them, I replied. The words came too easily. He didn't tease me for them. At a red light, he glanced over. That's not something you can promise alone, he said. I know, I answered. That's why I'm not. Something in his expression softened. Not relief. Recognition. His kitchen was spare but warm. Dark counters. Low lighting. The faint smell of citrus cleaner and coffee. He set 2 mugs on the counter, filled them without asking, then leaned back against the surface as if the evening had finally caught up to him. I don't want to survive this by being relocated, he said quietly. I don't want another subsidiary, another sanitized identity. Then don't, I said. He watched me. Help me dismantle it, I added. The structure, the department, the narrative, the city pulsed beyond the windows. For that, he said, I'd need someone inside the machine. I am the machine, I replied. Silence stretched between us. Then he nodded once. Then we stop pretending this is an audit, he said. We make it an exposure. He lifted his mug. Hesitated. To equal risk, he said. I touched my cup to his. The sound was soft. We didn't move apart immediately. Didn't need to. There was no script for this. No clause. No role. Just 2 people standing in a kitchen at night, exhausted and alert and choosing the same uncertainty. Not because it was safe. Because it was honest. And for the first time since the file had rewritten itself, my senses were quiet. Not empty. Quiet. Victor didn't summon me. He scheduled me. There was a difference. Summons were private. Unrecorded. A favor between blood. This was a calendar invitation copied to compliance, ethics and executive oversight, wrapped in neutral language and sent through official channels. Strategic alignment review. The meeting room in his wing was brighter than I remembered. The shelves of folders had been replaced by polished panels. No ghosts on display. Only authority. Victor stood when I entered. Theo, he said warmly. You look tired. Funny, I replied. So do your models. His eyes sharpened. Just a fraction. We've noticed irregularities in your recent reports, he said, gesturing me to the table. Delays, omissions, structural inconsistencies. I've been auditing an anomaly, I said. Victor folded his hands. Crow. Not a question. He doesn't stabilize, Victor continued. Which means he destabilizes. And yet your work suggests hesitation. I met his gaze. My work suggests uncertainty. Your work, he corrected gently, has never suggested that before. Something cold slid into place. We also noticed, he added, tapping his tablet, that you accessed pre-digital lineage partitions without authorization. I had authorization, I said. From a system that no longer exists. His voice remained calm. Almost affectionate. The department is concerned, he went on. Not about your loyalty. About your proximity. To whom? I asked. Victor's mouth curved. Don't pretend you don't know. The campaign didn't begin loudly. It never did. It appeared first as a question trending in financial analyst circles, then as a speculative article on a niche market blog, then as a leaked memo whose authenticity no one could quite verify. Is Crow Dynamics overperforming to conceal executive irregularities? Who really is Adrian Crow? Unanswered lineage questions raise governance concerns. The media office buzzed like a disturbed hive. Screens bloomed with timelines, sentiment graphs, preemptive rebuttals. Naomi Crow moved between teams with surgical precision, her voice calm, her hands never still. "They're not accusing," she murmured to me as we watched a headline populate. "They're seeding." Adrian stood behind us, jacket on, expression unreadable. "They want the market to start writing the story for them," he said. I felt it then. The pressure. The metallic taste. The familiar tightening behind my eyes. Except this time, it wasn't distant. It was personal. It was raining when I left the building. Hard. Vertical. The kind of rain that erased edges and turned the city into motion. I didn't take a car. I walked. The noise should have grounded me. It didn't. My comm vibrated again. Internal model update. Inherited risk assessment. I stopped under an awning, rain cutting silver lines through the air. Opened the file. The projection tree unfolded. Crow Dynamics. Reputational vectors. Governance instability. And then, beneath the executive branch, a new category bloomed into view. Collateral influence risks. My name was there. Not as author. As variable. Theo Vale. Probability index attached. The file scrolled. My access patterns. My communication density. My behavioral deviation from baseline. I stared at the screen. Rain soaking through my hair, the city blurring into color. They weren't monitoring me anymore. They were modeling me. I laughed once. Short. Disbelieving. The system hadn't just noticed. It had adapted. And now it was deciding whether I was still an asset. Or something that needed to be rewritten. The medical center didn't look like a place people were sent to disappear. That was the problem. Glass atrium. Soft lighting. White uniforms moving with choreographed calm. The kind of environment designed to suggest recovery, while quietly rewriting what recovery meant. I knew the building. 3 stress-induced executive interventions had passed through it in the last decade. None of them returned to power. Adrian's message had been short. Mandatory evaluation. Board directive. By the time I reached the front desk, the smell of disinfectant had already turned sharp in my nose. "Mr. Crow was admitted 20 minutes ago," the attendant said pleasantly. "He's undergoing preliminary neurological screening." "By whose authority?" I asked. She smiled. "Medical." I didn't raise my voice. I raised my clearance. The doors unlocked. The pressure behind my eyes spiked as I moved down the corridor, the walls too white, the silence too deliberate. I found him in a glass-walled room, seated on a reclined chair, adhesive sensors blooming across his temples like pale flowers. A physician stood beside a console, another adjusting the lighting. "Stop," I said. They turned. "This is an executive wellness procedure," the physician began. "This is succession optimization with a stethoscope," I cut in. "Disconnect him." Adrian's eyes met mine through the glass. Sharp. Controlled. And beneath it, something else. The unspoken question. I stepped inside. "He consented," the physician said. Adrian's jaw tightened. "To a check," he said. "Not to a cognitive audit." I moved to the console, flagged the protocol overlay. It wasn't treatment. It was mapping. Behavioral baselines. Emotional dampening probabilities. Early-stage identity interference. The beginning of erasure. "End the session," I said. "This will be reported." "So will I." For a moment, no one moved. Then the physician exhaled and gestured. The machine powered down. The sensors released. The silence that followed was heavy and alive. Adrian stood slowly. "Thank you," he said to no one in particular. We didn't speak until the elevator doors closed. The underground parking garage smelled of oil and wet concrete. My pulse hadn't slowed. My hands were shaking. "You shouldn't have done that," Adrian said quietly as we reached his car. "I absolutely should have." He turned on me. "I don't need to be extracted like an asset," he said. "I'm not another case study for your conscience." "That's not what this is," I snapped. "Isn't it?" His control finally cracked, the edge in his voice sharp. "Every system you've ever touched has been about management. Risk mitigation, outcome shaping. You intervened because the pattern didn't fit. Not because it was me. The words struck harder than he knew. I opened my mouth. Closed it. Then, because there was nowhere left to retreat, I said it. I intervened because I was afraid. He stilled. Of what? He asked. I laughed once, breathless and ugly. Of watching you disappear, I said. Of standing in another room full of files and convincing myself it was necessary. Of opening a report one day, and seeing your name in the past tense. The pressure broke. My voice didn't. I don't want you to become a conclusion, I said. I don't want to be good at surviving that. The garage echoed faintly around us. Adrian's anger didn't vanish. It transformed. You don't get to save me as a way to absolve yourself, he said softly. I know, I replied. That's why I'm not asking to save you. I met his eyes. I'm asking to stand with you. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his shoulders lowered, just slightly. You can't optimize a soul, he said. I'm not trying to. The rain had followed us underground, dripping from the ramp above, tapping a slow rhythm into the concrete. Eventually, he opened the car door. Come with me, he said. Not an order, an invitation, and for the first time since the system had noticed us, I felt something that wasn't fear. I felt chosen. The servers lived 3 floors beneath the old wing, not in the official infrastructure, in the place where abandoned systems were quietly allowed to keep working. Elliot was already there when I arrived, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled, eyes reflecting cascading code. You're late, he said. You're early, I replied. He snorted. I never left. The room pulsed with restrained energy. Racks of legacy hardware lined the walls, lights blinking in asynchronous rhythms. Here, the corporation kept what it didn't want to upgrade, but couldn't risk deleting. Elliot pulled up a composite interface. You're sure? He asked. No, I said. I'm ready. He nodded once and opened the channel. We had spent the last 48 hours assembling a map of the invisible structure, lineage instruments, medical protocols, reputational kill chains, pre-authorization frameworks. Every silent mechanism the department used to turn people into acceptable losses. Elliot's fingers flew. Encrypted packet routing to international financial regulators, he muttered. Secondary mirrors to medical ethics boards. Shadow drops to 2 investigative outlets who don't owe anyone favors. On the far screen, progress bars bloomed. After this, he said quietly. There's no version of the company where we're still employees. Good, I replied. The system hesitated. For half a second, the lights flickered. Then the transfers locked. Elliot exhaled. It's out, he said. The words didn't feel real. Adrian didn't come to the airport. That was the point. We stood on opposite sides of a glass wall while the city moved through us. He had arranged for me to leave on a domestic flight, nothing dramatic. Just a temporary vanishing. Distance to buy the truth time to detonate. They'll look for you first, he had said. Because you speak their language. And they'll come for you, I replied. Because you break it. We didn't touch. We didn't need to. Whatever happens next, he said. This wasn't an extraction. No, I agreed. It was a choice. He nodded once. Then he turned and walked back into the city. I boarded the plane. The first alert came before we reached cruising altitude. Then another. Then dozens. My comm flooded with emergency bulletins, compliance notifications, automated escalations that no longer recognized my authority. International oversight committees announce investigation into Veil Group governance structures. Anonymous data release alleges systemic human rights and medical ethics violations. Multiple executives placed on administrative leave pending inquiry. I watched the press feeds populate, each headline a fracture spreading outward. Crow dynamics trended within the hour. So did the phrase, succession optimization. I didn't feel triumph. I felt space. On the ground, the corporation convulsed. Emergency meetings. Locked floors. Access revoked. Mara Hensley's office was found empty. No forwarding trace. Victor Vale's name crossed the screen an hour later. Warrant issued pending arrest on charges of corporate conspiracy, medical coercion, and financial obstruction. I closed my eyes. Not in grief. In release. The system had always made noise. Warnings. Predictions. Pressure. Now there was something else beneath it. A quiet I had never heard before. Fear, yes. The future was uncharted. But threaded through it was a lightness that tasted nothing like metal. It tasted like air. And for the first time since the file had rewritten itself, the absence ahead of me didn't feel like erasure. It felt like possibility. I watched the boardroom from 3,000 feet away. The news feed split my screen into neat rectangles, live aerial footage of the Vale Group headquarters. Ticker streams crawling beneath them, the polished insignia of networks that rarely agreed on anything except the value of spectacle. The boardroom itself looked like a cathedral of glass. Long table, high-backed chairs. The architecture of permanence. It had always been designed to make people feel small. Today, it made them visible. The emergency session had been called under international oversight. Cameras were not allowed inside. But nothing stopped the microphones. The foundation predates the public structure by 6 years. Beneficiary status was concealed through layered fiduciary shells. Genetic confirmation is attached to the audit. The words were clinical. The implications weren't. A separate feed cut in. Adrian stood at a lectern in the press annex, Naomi beside him. Legal counsel flanking both sides. The city behind them glowed pale through the glass wall. He wasn't wearing a suit jacket. Just a dark shirt. Open collar. Unarmored. "I will not speculate," he said evenly, as flashbulbs burst. "I will clarify." He didn't read from the prepared document in his hand. He folded it. "The foundation identified in the disclosures was established by the corporation's founder," he continued. "Its sole beneficiary was me." A ripple moved through the room. For 3 decades that fact was concealed through contracts, proxies, and silent trusts designed to finance my life without naming it, he said. This was not protection. It was containment. Questions detonated. He raised a hand. "I am not here to claim a legacy," he said. "I am here to end a system." The words carried. "They built a department to manage bloodlines like unstable assets," he said. "To optimize succession by erasing people without acknowledging them." He looked directly into the cameras. "I will not participate in a structure that requires disappearance to function." Naomi's eyes shone. The feeds fractured. Executive resignations scrolled. Stock suspensions. Government task forces. The boardroom behind the scenes collapsed into movement. Advisors standing, documents sliding. The choreography of a system realizing it no longer owned the narrative. I closed my eyes as Adrian finished. "I am stepping into this role openly," he said. "Not as a correction, not as an anomaly." He breathed once. "As a person." The main office was empty when I returned. No assistants. No security lines. No ambient corporate murmur. Just a building full of power, with no one left to pretend it was stable. I walked through the executive floor slowly. Past the conference room where names had rewritten themselves. Past Victor's door. It was open. The shelves were bare. Whatever hadn't been seized had been stripped. I stood in the center of the space and listened. There was no pressure, no metallic taste, no warning hum beneath my skin. The future did not tighten around me. The system had not recalculated. It had broken. My comm vibrated. "Adrian, it's done. Adrian, they can't unname me now." I rested my hand against the cool glass of the wall, looking out at a city that no longer belonged to the same stories. For the first time since I was old enough to understand risk, the projection lines were gone. All that remained was a single stubborn data point, a name. Still there. Still his. And finally, out of reach. My office had already begun to forget me. The personalization glass had reset to neutral. The desk surface no longer recognized my biometrics. Even the light temperature had shifted to the building's default, cooler, less human. I stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure why I'd come back. There were no files to collect. Everything that had ever mattered had been digital. And everything digital had already moved on. I crossed the room, sat once at the desk where my name had written futures. Then I opened a blank resignation form. No justification field was required. Just a signature. Theo Vale. The system accepted it without comment. I waited for the pressure to rise. For the faint metallic warning. For the sense of collapse preparing itself. Nothing came. Only quiet. I stood, straightened a jacket I no longer needed to look authoritative in, and walked out. Adrian's new office didn't look like a command center. It looked like a workspace. Lower ceilings. Natural wood. Real books. Fewer screens. He was standing at the window when I entered, sleeves rolled, speaking with Naomi in a low voice. She smiled when she saw me and slipped past with a nod that held something like relief. You survived the paperwork, Adrian said. Barely, I replied. It tried to keep me. A faint smile touched his mouth. How does it feel? He asked. To not belong to a system? I considered. Like stepping off a moving walkway, the ground's still there. But my legs don't know what to do with it yet. He studied me. I'm rebuilding, he said. Not the structure, the purpose. I waited. He moved closer, stopped an appropriate distance away. I don't want a risk department, he continued. I don't want a compliance arm that turns people into projections. He inhaled once. I want someone who understands what we dismantled, he said. And what it cost. Someone who won't let me turn power into abstraction. My pulse shifted. You're offering me a job, I said. I'm offering you a position, he corrected. Beside me. I searched his face. Not for strategy. For intention. And if I say no? I asked. Then I'll still ask you to coffee, he replied. Because I'm done pretending proximity is only professional. A laugh escaped me. Soft. Unplanned. That might be the least efficient negotiation tactic I've ever seen, I said. He smiled properly then. Good, he said. I'm tired of efficient. The cafe was small. Loud. Human. We sat by the window, cups between us, the city doing what it always did, existing. No cameras. No metrics. Just warmth and steam and the clink of ceramic. I don't know what I am without the forecasts. I admitted. You're a man who didn't let a system finish a sentence, Adrian said. That seems like a place to start. I watched people pass. Felt the day. Felt my own body without it translating sensation into outcome. I'll stay, I said. He didn't reach for my hand. He just nodded. And for the first time in years, acceptance didn't feel like surrender. It felt like choice. The new office still smelled like paint and unfinished intention. Half the walls were bare. The furniture didn't match yet. Someone had stacked unopened boxes beside a window, as if daring the future to declare what belonged in them. I liked that. It felt like a place that hadn't decided what it was allowed to become. Adrian was arguing quietly with a facilities manager about the necessity of a second espresso machine when I walked in. We are not running a crisis bunker, the manager said patiently. We dismantled a dynasty, Adrian replied. Caffeine is infrastructure. When he saw me, his expression shifted, not into performance, but into something warmer. The manager sighed, scribbled something and retreated. You're encouraging inefficiency, I told him. I'm encouraging survival, he countered. There's a difference. I set my tablet down on a desk that hadn't yet learned my habits. Outside the windows, the city was beginning to change color. Come up, he said. The terrace wrapped around the upper level like an afterthought. Low seating. Glass railing. Wind that didn't belong to anyone. The sun was lowering itself into the skyline, turning towers into copper silhouettes and windows into soft fire. We stood side by side, forearms resting against the rail. Below us, the city exhaled. I waited for it, I admitted quietly. For what? The sensation, I said. The tightening. The hum. The part of me that always knew when something was about to break. And? He asked. And it didn't come. The absence was gentle. No pressure behind my eyes. No metallic ghost on my tongue. No ozone warning me of structural sins. Just air. Just warmth. Just the quiet presence of someone not being converted into a projection. I spent my entire career preparing for collapse, I said. I don't think I ever learned how to exist without it. Adrian's shoulder brushed mine, light and unforced. Then we learn, he said. Without models. I glanced at him. Together. He didn't answer immediately. He turned his head, met my eyes. Yes. The word was simple. Unqualified. We stood there as the sky deepened, the city becoming a constellation instead of a circuit. Somewhere below, someone laughed. Somewhere else, a train cut a bright line through the evening. I used to think people were the most unstable variables in any system, I said. And now? Now I think systems are what happen when people stop choosing each other. The wind lifted. Carried the scent of something cooking somewhere we didn't need to analyze. I don't measure risk anymore, I said. I measure presence. He smiled. Not the CEO's smile. Not the one built for rooms. The one meant for moments. We didn't seal anything. No contracts. No declarations. No optimizations. Just two men on a terrace at sunset, standing in a city that no longer knew how to categorize them. And for the first time, I didn't want it to. I no longer assign people to probabilities. I choose who stands beside me. And I choose to stay.